I'm so glad that you're all here to learn a bit more about SQL. Even if you're not a SQL user, you're just like, I don't even know what SQL is. You're affected by it. We're all affected by these queries, just like David brought out during the introduction, where he said he went to the bank and waited. We've all experienced that wait at either a bank or we're at the Home Depot and checking out, or at the grocery store, and the person standing there trying to make it work says, I don't know why it's going so slowly. And well, most of us data people know why it's going so slowly. There's so much going on, so many queries, so many transactions being executed at the same time. It can slow things down. Of course, other things can slow things down as well, including the weather. So, but what can we do? What can we do to ensure that our queries, if we're writing our own queries that other people are going to use, are the most efficient? And also, think about this. If we write a query that is as efficient as we think it needs to be, and we run the query, and it takes literally a minute or 2 minutes to run, and you might think, well, that's not all that long. But when our queries are running inefficiently, we're effectively slowing everybody else's queries down as well. So when we add it all together, let's say my query could have been 10 seconds faster. 10 seconds, what's the big deal, Tom? Well, during that 10 seconds, I'm actually slowing the server down for everybody else during those 10 seconds when my query could have been 10 seconds faster. So I'm actually affecting them as well during those 10 seconds. Do you see how it compounds and just loads up the system so very quickly? It's a lot like a freeway. We're all going at 30, 40, 50, 60, even 70 miles an hour. One car slows down or has a flat or something, everybody slows down and it becomes very frustrating. So this is what happens, same thing with SQL. So join me now for the next 25 minutes, and I'm going to share with you a couple of key things that can help all of our SQL queries. And again, you're probably thinking, Tom, I don't write SQL queries. How does this affect me? Well, I'm so glad you're here and watching anyways, because it's always good to know how it works and why it works the way it does. So with our understanding, we have less frustration when things don't go exactly the way we want them to go. So understanding, that's great. SQL, fun stuff. Using it, well, if you're a data guy like me, it just sends chills up and down your spine, because data and queries are fun. So we're going to talk about a few key areas of data queries that are going to speed up queries in general, and also a few things that are very, very specific as well. So you'll notice our first main topic here for our webinar together is how to speed up our queries when we write them. And we can do so in one of 4 ways based on this discussion. There's hundreds of other ways to speed up a query. And this is really, really very basic stuff. I hand selected these 4 ways because they're the most effective that we can all take advantage of, such as order by. What do I mean by order by? That's how we say in SQL, sort. So it's the quickest fix for slowness, that's for sure. And then who needs all the data? All the data in the database? Who needs that? But yet that's what we're querying against all the time. Why would I search through millions of records over and over and over again when I know I'm only need to search through these couple hundred or these couple thousand? We'll show you how to get around that big giant search and have to search just a little bit at a time. What a great idea, right? Clustered and non-clustered, it's a SQL term. It has to do with indexing. Indexing is something that happens behind the scenes. You don't see it, but boy, does it speed up a database query when it's done properly. In fact, we call them index tuning. We tune our indexes to meet the needs of the query and those who are going to be consuming this data. I'm going to just show you something very, very basic about indexes, but hopefully get your wheels spinning as to how important it is to understand how an index works. And then finally, an extra special bonus, Excel. Oh my gosh, it's still awesome. It always has been awesome. What a great tool. Well, we can move our data over to Excel and do a lot of work there. Take a lot of weight off the server's shoulders and take the data over to Excel and perform those mundane things like sorting and filtering. Instead of making the server do it all, we can bring it local and just spend the time with our own little world so that we're not affecting everybody else in their world. So it's so important to understand all these things. And let's get started with our first SQL shortcut, if you will, our first SQL feature, which is going to be sorting. So here I am in SQL Server Management Studio. You might be using a different tool, but I'm going to start a new query. And as you can see, once I start sharing my screen, that you're going to be able to see exactly what, oh, I am sharing my screen. Here we go. Screen share and share. There we go. I didn't see a box around it. So with the SQL Server Management Studio up on my screen, I want to make sure I'm querying the correct database. And I'm going to be using this Contoso database. Those of you who've been around for a while know all about Contoso and Northwind, yada, yada, yada. That's all good stuff. But let's take a little bit of time here, save a little time by me just copying and pasting the query. I don't want you to have to watch me write a query. So I've got one here called order by slowing. Not order by slowing, it's order by slowing. So if you're into SQL at all, you know that's a command called order by, which basically means sort. I'd like you to notice down here at the bottom of the screen, there's our little SQL timer when we run a query. So I'm going to go ahead and click the execute button right up there. Watch it execute. We can watch it down here executing. We're already ticking into 4 seconds, 5 seconds. This is going to be probably the most boring part of this webinar because I have to have it watch it tick all the way through. We're up to 14 seconds now. Let's see how many rows it gathers. We're going to wait. We're going to wait patiently. Here it comes. Oh, it was 21 seconds. 21 seconds to gather and display 3.4 million records. And this query, I'm going to do a Control R to get rid of the results pane. This query did not have an order by command. In fact, I had it commented out. That's what the two little dashes are all about here. So I'm going to get rid of those two dashes and re-invoke the order by command. In other words, we're going to sort. Now, while it's sorting, I want your attention here. While it's sorting, I want you to notice how much longer it takes. Remember last time it was 21 seconds? Let's take a look now. I'm going to click on the execute button and it's executing the query and we'll see it's ticking by over there in the lower right corner. Let's think about it for a moment. If order by is invoked, do you think it's going to be easier or harder for the server to put things in order? Well, it's obviously going to be harder because it's got to look through the whole list to make sure everything's in the proper order before it displays it. So every time it goes through the list, it's checking to make sure these individual items are in the proper order. So this one went up to 27 seconds just because we turned on the order by. So imagine 27 seconds, 21 seconds, that's a difference of 6 seconds. If we had, let's say 10 queries we run per day that are wasting 6 seconds, that's 10 times 6, so there's 60 seconds. So every one of us, let's say there's 200 of us querying this database, every one of us are wasting at a minimum a minute a day. You take that, multiply times the 200 people, there's 200 minutes a day being wasted. That's 3.3 hours of wasted time. You might be thinking, Tom, how in the world are we going just counting seconds? This is silly. Well, this is the silliness that data analysts and database experts think about every day to make things faster. So organizations that have 100, 200, 300, 5,000 people using the database at one time, every second counts, and that means money and time. Amazing, right? So to summarize, our first feature here to help us really understand what we can do to make our queries more effective. Don't use order by, don't sort. But Tom, I need it to be sorted. Well, what are we going to do with our data most likely when we're done with it? Move it over to Excel, right? That's what almost all of us do, or we move it over to another system. Isn't that interesting? Sure, we're going to move it to another system. So, yeah, right. 12. Thank you for that, David. It's so important that boy, I can't even imagine the time we've wasted over the years by creating these inefficient queries. So take the order by out and do it over in Excel. Excel is affecting only you. It's not affecting everybody else on the network when you sort. And you know what? Don't we often, if you're a query writer, think about this now. Think, when I write my queries, do I refine my queries or do I get it right the first time? Almost always we write a query, run it. Oh, we need to change this. We refine it, we run it again. Oh, I would love to format that. We run it again, we refine it. You know, we just ran that query 3 times, touching 3.4 million records 3 different times. Oh, now that just multiplied that 1 minute of waste to 2 minutes of waste to 3 minutes of waste. You see how it all compounds? Pretty amazing. So that's the order by tip that I wanted to share with you. Here's a quick true story. I went to an office once, helped them with their queries. They said, you know, this query takes literally over 5 minutes to run. Is there anything we can do? And I said, well, let's take a look at it. And right on down at the bottom, that's the first place I looked, right on down at the bottom, do you have an order by in there? Sure enough, they did. I said, how important is the ordering for you? And they said, well, not really important at all because we're just going to reorder it anyways when we get it over to Excel. I said, let's take it out. So we took out the order by command. We executed this query that normally took 5 or 6 minutes. The query then ran in less than a minute. It was literally running between 50 and 60 seconds. And they were just astounded by that one simple little trick. So look into it, see about your queries, and see if that order by command can help you out. Remember why we're doing all this. We're not doing this just to make queries faster. We're doing this to make queries more efficient across the board for everybody. Yes, you don't want to be that stalled car on the freeway where you're actually freezing everybody up, slowing everybody down. You don't want to be that person. People walking through the hallway saying, there he is. There's that guy that slows down the computer all the time. We don't want to be that person, right? So let's look at another one of our little tips here. Remember there was 3.4 million records in this database. I picked a relatively, medium-sized database. 3.4 is medium. I'd like to have you notice how I have a special clause in here called the where clause, where we minimize our results. We take our results, instead of being 3.4 million results, we say, no, I only want those results that have maybe more than 5 items in the quantity, and that the store channel is called a store rather than being an online or something else. So it's pretty interesting. We've got a double criteria here. It's against the same database. It's against the same data set, 3.4 million records. I'd like you to notice what happens when I execute this query. Please watch down here at the time. Ready and set, and off we go. Executing the query. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds, 5. Remember, it was at 21 and what was it? 21 and 27, something like that. 6 seconds difference. So we've limited our scope down to some criteria, which then produced only a 14-second query with 1.8 million records. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? The fewer items to return, the faster the query is going to go. So here's a rule of absolute, if you will, within queries. Rarely, if ever, will you run a query without some criteria. We have to have criteria so that we don't expose the whole data set, all 3.4 million records, into this query. No, we limit it. Again, back at what we were talking about earlier in our slide deck, our presentation, who needs all the data? Does anybody ever need all the data except for maybe the database administrator? That would probably be answer is no. So we're better off always having a where clause. But then again, we go back to that refining thing that we talked about, refining the query. A lot of us will build a query and then we'll refine it, and then we'll build a query and we'll refine it, and we'll run the query multiple times during our refinement exercise. So what can we do to make things better? Let's say, for instance, now, the results that this query produced right here, 14 seconds, 1.8 million records. These are the records that we're going to be looking into all the rest of today and all into tomorrow, Friday. These 1.8 million records. This is all we're interested in for this rest of this week. But there's no reason then to continue querying the large database. We could take this query and turn it into something special. We could turn it into a temporary table, which means basically shove all this information into another table, removing it from the 1.8 million, or excuse me, the 3.4 million, and putting it in its own table, and then we'll query that for the rest of the week. Doesn't that sound logical? 3.4 million, 1.8 million. That's going to be more refined. Let's do that one more time, and let's just change this from greater than to less than 5. We'll re-execute that query with an F5, and let's see how long it takes to run this query. Oh, 142,000 records in 1 second. That's the data set we're looking for. Do you see the impact? 1.8 million down to 142,000. Oh my gosh, so much better. Now we're going to take this result that we're going to be querying for the next 2 days, and we're going to add a line of code in here to our query. We're going to say insert. We're going to say insert into, but before I type it in there, I want to talk to you about what I'm about to do here. When we insert something into a new table, we're basically saying take all these records and insert them into a new table so I can query that table instead. So we just simply put the command into in between these commands, and we tell it which table we're going to name this, how we're going to name this temporary table. Let's call it Tom's data set. Notice I have a pound sign in front of that. That tells it to become a temporary table. Now, how temporary is this temporary table? Simply put, it's going to exist as long as this query exists. If I close this query, whether I save it or not doesn't matter, but as soon as I close this query, that temporary table goes away, flushes itself out of the system. So we're not wasting a lot of space in the server by building temporary tables. Isn't that interesting as well? So let's take a look over here under databases. We'll expand that, and we'll notice there's some databases that I have, also some system databases, and there's a database here called the temp database. And if I expand that, you'll notice there's the temporary tables right there. I'll click and expand. You can see plainly that there are no temporary tables as of yet. So now we'll come back over here to our lovely query that has this new line that says insert this information into a new table that we can then query. I'll execute this query. Ready, set, execute. And it says, okay, Tom, 142,000 rows were affected and shoved into a new temporary table. Let's go check it out, shall we? There's our new temporary table right there. So what good is a temporary table? How does it fit into this whole set of logic that we're trying to do, trying to save time, trying to occupy the server less so that the server freeway runs more smoothly? So we took this 3.8 million records, 3.4 million records. We brought it down to the 142,000 records that we know we're going to be needing today and tomorrow. And from now on, for the rest of the day, today and tomorrow, we're going to be querying that little teeny table of 142,000 records. Doesn't that sound faster? Absolutely, yes. So let's go ahead and build a quick query just to show you how we would now access or execute against that temporary table. We'll come down here and build another query. We'll say select all. Now the asterisk is wildcard. That means give me all the fields, all the information from, and here's the kicker, everybody, all I have to do is type in a pound sign. There's my new data set. Selecting this and executing that with an F5, you see I get my 142,000 records, and it took almost 0 seconds. Wow, what a difference that makes. And now I can refine this even further, and I can also feel confident of rerunning this query over and over and over and over again without feeling like I'm tying up the server and slowing everybody else down while they're waiting in the teller line, wondering why Tom is taking so long getting his new PIN number on his card or whatever it is at the bank. So let's go ahead and do another query and pull this together even more accurately. Let's look for store key number 43. That's all we're interested in. So we'll come down here and say where. Remember I told you this earlier. Without a where clause, we're going to be querying against the whole data set. Our data set's a lot smaller now though, but a where clause is always a good idea. Where store key is equal to 43. Let's execute this query and see what we get. Well, would you look at that? 390 rows, almost a zero execution time. Yes, you can spend all the time you need right here querying that new data set of 142,000. I can't emphasize this enough. Your temporary tables are just magical. But let's put this into perspective with a group of people. Let's say you're a team lead and you've learned about temporary tables and you've told your whole team, hey team, Tom told me that you can build temporary tables. Let's build a temporary table and query against it as a team so we're not all touching the big database of 3.4 million records. Well, temporary tables are very unique to me and this one query. If we wanted to go that route and share this temporary table with everybody, we have to make it a bit more broad and a bit more open to everybody. So instead of creating a temporary table, if you have the rights in your environment, you might want to create an actual permanent table by just removing the pound sign. And of course, you'd have to check with your database administrator and find out which schemas you're allowed to write to, or you can just find out by trying, but it's better to check first. But where you can write and where you can create stuff outside the temporary world. And if you can, well, you can save your team so much time so that not everybody has to be querying the 3.4 million records or 5.6 million records or 10 million records. Bring it down, share it out. We're saving everybody time. Let's give it a shot. I'll go ahead and select this record, this data set. We've just created a new table. Where did it go? Where did it go? Let's go take a look over here on the left-hand side. Right over here, we'll expand our database. We'll expand our tables. And let's take a look. We have a new table right there called Tom's data set. Yes, it's a legitimate table now in this database. This is why we want to clean up our messes as well. Don't leave it there. But now it's available for you and your team to query that data over and over and over and over again, occupying that server less and less and less. How cool is that? Yes. Now, when you're done, of course, it's good etiquette to drop your tables. So the command drop table, and we can put in Tom's data set. Good etiquette, you should always drop your tables when you are done. Why not delete? Well, drop is the command we use for getting rid of tables. And you'll notice it's right down there. Bing. I'll slide back up. We'll do a quick little refresh. We'll scroll on back down. You'll see that that table has now been eliminated. And we're back into the clean mode. No more messy tables, but it served its purpose for me and perhaps my team. So to summarize this little exercise, we've talked about sorting order by and how it can really speed up your database queries and how it affects everybody else. We've also talked about temporary tables as well as permanent tables, how we can query against a smaller data set, which makes it so much nicer. And then finally, right now, I'd like to share with you one more way to speed things up. Didn't I mention earlier that Excel is just by far one of the coolest things that ever happened to mankind? I mean, there's water, there's air, and then there's Excel. So it's pretty amazing, pretty amazing. So I'd like to share with you this query here again, but I don't want it to be here in SQL Server Management Studio. I need it to be in a more friendly environment, such as Excel. So I'm going to add just a couple lines of code above this. And now this is not the only way to do what I'm about to share with you. There's a lot of ways to do everything in SQL Server Management Studio, but this is called creating a view. We can create a view of the data. By saying create view, I can give it a name. Let's call it v underscore Tom had fun today. All right, so we'll create a view and we'll say, create a view as this query right here. Interesting. So I'll go ahead and choose execute. Oop, it says order by clause is invalid. Now, isn't that interesting? If I'm going to take this data turn it into a view so I can use it over in Excel, SQL Server Management Studio says, Tom, why are you making me sort it then? Just sort it over in Excel, for goodness sakes. Don't make me do it here in SQL Server Management Studio and affect everybody else on the network. It's a dumb idea. So they tell me, Tom, that's not the smartest way to go. Get rid of it. So I've gotten rid of it. I'll now execute this, and notice it says the command is completed successfully. Let's go over here to our views and see if our view is there. Yes, there's our view. Now I've only got 3 more minutes with you. So I'm going to go over here to Excel straight away. We're going to go up to the the data menu, and we'll choose get data from a database, SQL Server database specifically. So once I choose get from a database, SQL Server database, it's going to want to know what is the name of your database, Tom. So my database is called HP guest room / SQL Express. That's my database server name. Very logical, right? And you'll notice there's all my databases. I'm going to expand Contoso. And notice there's my view. All my views. Oh, that's the one I'm looking for right there. I click on that, and then I can come down here and load it directly into Excel. Or I can tell it to load to our data model in case I have more than 1 million records. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell it to load directly into Excel. And how cool is this? And there it is here in Excel. Just like that, all 142,000 records are right here in Excel. I can sort until my heart's content. I can filter until the cows come home. I have all these opportunities now to build pivot tables and charts and graphs. And I'm never touching the SQL Server again, unless I want the latest and greatest data. Just come on up here and refresh, and it refreshes that view. The view refreshes the database, pulls it all back down here. Just think, someone who doesn't really want to have to learn all about SQL, we could send this spreadsheet to them and say, you know what, when you want the latest and greatest, just hit the refresh button. Just don't hit it all day long, because that's kind of, getting in the way of what we're really trying to do here. But nonetheless, there's your data. And how exciting is that? So we have spent some time learning about SQL and how we can speed it up so it doesn't affect just us. So we've got a faster query. It affects so many people, and that time is money. And we have a way to affect that personally and as a group.